We are now recording. So basically what I'm going to do is sort of as I'm calling this the team check. So defining our challenges. And hopefully you're working on your challenge and we'll get that to both of us this week so you know what it is. But I'm going to take you through this so to make sure that you have a pretty good understanding of what your team process is here. And so again, just looking at week 4, what your team, where you should be right now is that you've done enough analysis of all that stuff we've dumped on you. Wall Street Journal, your own experiences in terms of school. Hopefully you've been talking to some people about, how things should be evolving. So where we are now is beginning to move up the U. If you remember, going down to U is how you generate the conversation. But now we're moving sort of up the U because what you're now going to try to do is crystallize all this data that you've been interacting with, talking about, and then start brainstorming about what what this new environment can be for you. And at the bottom there, and this is the most important thing, is that you begin to really allow yourselves to do that without constraints. And that is extremely hard, particularly when you're a practicing administrator within a school or a teacher within a school, and you're dealing with that current reality constantly. So you're always going to be fighting that. And if you remember in 625, it always talk about the voice of judgment and that voice of cynicism and the voice of fear, that you need to be able to kind of, push that away so that, you allow the possibility of a presencing to emerge. So I think that's the important thing for you, to look at, and this is where we are at this particular point. So with that, we've done, you're probably sick of looking at this, but, we've looked at, in 800 you dealt with that concept of the iceberg, then you have the U. So again, what you're doing in design thinking, right now you're coming out of your challenge. So your team should have a challenge. I'm going to show you some examples of challenges in a couple of minutes. And then from that process, you're going to start doing ideation. And we'll define what ideation is, and look at what that is. But what's important about that and what is extremely critical in design thinking is that you're able to develop an empathy for the issue in which you're working towards. And so if you remember the concept of open mind and open heart, that you're really now working around that idea of open heart that Sharma talked about, because what you're trying to do is to get an empathetic feel for what those issues are and what you're looking at both as an individual within a team, but more importantly, collectively as a team, because that's going to become an extremely important leadership skill in understanding how creativity is an integral part to leadership. Then what you guys are going to start moving into next week is prototyping your idea, to begin to explore possibilities of what it might look like. And then eventually what you'll do is you're going to test this out from week 6 on in terms of developing your project. So again, I want you to keep in mind, as you think about what you learned in 800 and 625, how design thinking as a structure plays out. And hopefully, as you've been reading Tim Brown's book, this is starting to, solidify in your mind, particularly that interaction between divergent and convergent thinking. Okay? So any questions about that so far? Makes basically good sense. And if your cat wants to raise a question, that's okay.
Yes, may I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Sabina. Okay, just for clarity, and I'm sorry I joined as soon as you start recording. So for this week, our team, we need to send to you our challenge.
Yes.
That we're facing. And
yes.
And we include these components right here that you have listed.
All I want from you and both of us, from both classes, is all we want is the challenge statement. Because now what you're going to do is start doing ideation, prototyping. Okay?
Just a challenge statement from our group. Okay,
That's all we're going to get.
thank you.
Okay. So,
I thought it was interesting in, I think it was the Brown book. It was discussing how you're nonlinear when you're doing design thinking, and you're linear if you're following the business model of whatever company. And what we're doing with the nonlinear design thinking is you're like prototyping again and again and again and again, and you're adjusting what you're doing each time you prototype, rather than the usual business model of a linear fashion where you go step by step by step by step, and you get to the end and it sucks.
and you know, and that's a good point because, but I would just add to it, it's not just the business model, it's also schools, because you know what happens when you're in the school environment, you have all these state mandates that come down, and generally they are in extremely convergent point of view, that if you don't follow it in that point of view, you get yourselves in a lot of trouble. So I think, yeah, that distinction becomes important. And what happens then, and I'm just going to throw these up real quick, if you remember really what you've been doing the first 3 weeks, and again, you know, I was kind of listening to your talking about what Dr. Betts has you doing in her course. And what I said to you, this course, you know, I want you guys to understand that I'm trying to make it as playful as possible without as much stress. But when I look at it, it actually demands a lot of interaction on your part using, if you remember, when we talked about co-initiating, co-sensing, co-presencing, for the first 3 weeks, your team was involved in that. And you should reflect back on that where you were, as you looked at all that data that we had out there, you know, where was the most potential that you would see, and how was your conversations with each other, you know, in terms of that, where you are now is, okay, now we're coming down to the point where it's time now to create what that challenge is going to be. Then we're going to start doing the co-creation and then co-evolving as we go up that. And so what you'll learn in the prototyping process, you know, as Dr. Sutton pointed out, is that it is iteration, 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 and it's not designed to come up with a final product. It's designed to help you look at so many different types of possibilities. Okay?
I also think that actually it's the trouble when I start to think about what I do and what I have done. I think if we all think about it, especially I'm partial to special education teachers, having taught that for most of my career. If we take a teacher's manual and go lockstep with what they tell us to do, we're not going to succeed. And when you're working with special needs kids, and heck, all kinds of kids, you iterate, reiterate again and again, because if A didn't get them, B will get them, or they'll connect to you once you get to C. And we do that on the fly. So I think the co-sensing and the co-presencing, we've done naturally our whole teaching lives. We've just never put it in these words.
Yeah, and the other problem with that is that we're all, as I said to all of you, is that we function in extremely linear organizations. And I don't care if it's in education or even in business, unless you work for Google or some of these cutting edge places that really buys into this stuff. But our tendency is, and remember what I told you, I think I told you guys this in the beginning, is that concept of structure shapes the behavior of people over time. That's why I want you to seriously think about the physical structure of what your place is going to be like, because that is what really influences behavior. and allows for the emergence of the types of mental models that can take place. So all we want you to do is understand that connection between the 625 material and this, so that you can see the congruency between those courses. So what you're doing then is you've really been asking yourselves, or you should be asking yourself, is based on what we've learned in those things, what's the learning needs for the future, and as a team, define your purpose as an educational development company. And I want you to think about that. Think about that your final presentation, when you do that final project, is that you're up in front of a group of venture capitalists who are looking at funding your program. So that's something to keep in mind. And I'll show you, we're going to go out to that website that we sent out to you about that project, a real live project that's trying to redefine high schools, that I want to show you the similarity of it, that actually your teams could put your prototype and your model into that competition that's being done. And we'll look at that in a couple minutes. So I want you to think about this. So here's some examples of your question is, how do we design schools in order to meet student needs, world 21st century? So one group came up, and I don't know if you can read this, okay, to design a community system of education builds on foundational structures that support connections and understanding to both local and global society, where sustainability and development of community members is a priority. So that team utilized that in order to begin to shape what that learning community would be like. And in a couple of weeks, I'll show you some of the outcomes of what that group came up with. Here's another challenge statement. Develop a sustainable, accessible, and affordable model of education that encourages student autonomy, creativity, and connections to real-world practice throughout the educational continuum. So they looked at, and I can tell you this team looked at intergenerational learning across all age spans. So that's what they were doing in terms of their challenge statement. And this one, basically, and I left the whole thing in, they basically were very interested in how storytelling is used, has been used in many nonprofits and foundation grant works and charities and social justice groups to get their stories out there. So what they want to do, and what they designed, was to bring the storytelling model into a comprehensive change in learning from K to adult curriculum. So their challenge was, how do we redesign education around the concept of storytelling to affect a broader change in terms of the communities that they were working in? And then the last one, excuse me, the last one was a sustainable technological-based program, educational program, to connect learners around the world in a flexible and personalized learning network that prepares them to collaborate across global issues. So these were some of the challenges that other teams, other cohorts came up with. So I just wanted to show you what that challenge should look like, as you send them to us. And then what they will do then is drive the next, activities that you'll be involved in. And that next activity is really now moving into the ideation. So what your team wants to do then is, as you look at that, and I attached, I believe today, if you look in this week, I added in the prototyping model paper that comes from Otto Scharmer to help you to begin to look at. Okay, so you should be able to download that. I added it in today, and both classes should have it. So what you're going to start doing now is to get together and begin to look at brainstorming, the possibilities of what we can really do. And the important component of this is that it's often the wild ideas that spark the visionary thoughts. So you need to allow yourself the luxury of just exploring ideas with not downloading any bias that you might have towards any of those ideas. You should allow them to come out. So part of this activity over the next week is to get you to at least experience the possibilities of what this is without the confines of current reality. So that's what happens in ideation. So as you look at it, as you look at this, what you're going to do is, all right, you're going to take a look at all the stuff you came up with, and then as you think about that challenge, then try to develop about 5 ideas that really jump out to you and share them with the team. Then you begin to look for emerging themes or patterns among all the stuff that all of you bring in terms of your teams. Now, I'm going to tell you something. This is an important activity for you to learn to do down the road, because if you're going to do a qualitative research study, one of the things that you will do in a qualitative research study is the development of coding. And coding is when you take large bits of data that is either transcribed, interviews, or movies or pictures, and then what you're looking for is what are the emerging themes that emerge out of that. So I just want to give you a little heads up that also built into this is to kind of get you to understand how do you develop themes out of large data sets. Then what you're going to do is craft insight statements. You take the themes, you reshape them in short statements like, our school will be intergenerational. We believe that intergenerational learning is extremely important because the data says when older people work with younger people, both grow together. So that's just an example of what I'm talking about. And then you're going to develop how might we make these statements which can lead to opportunity for design. So if you believe that intergenerational learning is an important concept, then how do you design the physical structure for that to take place? What are the types of behaviors that would have to be exhibited within our model for these things to happen? So that gives you an example of what we're talking about. And then the last thing is then you begin to brainstorm the possibilities of that design to address your challenge. So any comments, questions for us based off of what I just hit you with there?
Just a comment that from those themes that they develop as looking at all their ideas, as they develop those themes, it's from that their project will develop.
Yep. Yep.
The themes will guide you right down a little funnel, right to a project that will suit exactly what you've been looking at.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
So tonight, our group's meeting, and we're going to work on a challenge.
Okay.
So let's say at this stage, we say we're going to have this ocean-going school that's going to bring people from the States, train people in different parts of the third world doing X, Y, Z. And then next week, when we look at all these ideas and other themes emerge, can we then change that, what we thought our challenge was at this point?
Well, what you want to do is if that challenge is what you collectively want to build out of, what you would change. What I'm going to say is, would you not change the fact that, one, you want to work with third world nations or have kind of this floating school? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's what I got right now.
Okay, no, that's good. That's fine. So if you're looking at that, and as you start going through the brainstorming activity, that you might end up modifying a challenge to maybe not make it into a boat that goes around, but it might emerge into, something that's more stationary, or something that's much more virtual or whatever. So yeah, you can nuance the process around. But that idea of that's not a bad idea. I
You know,
mean,
we could call it the traveling education carnival. That would,
whatever, seriously. It
But I
might
think-
sound crazy, but that's okay.
I think what he was saying, tell me if I'm wrong, as we get to develop, start developing this challenge, and then we suddenly go a different direction or veer off in a different angle, just on some part of your challenge, is that okay?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
That's the whole. In a ball of wax, that's the whole idea about this type of learning.
Yeah,
You
because
have to go sequentially, that you can go in a nonlinear fashion, and to hang a right, at the next idea is okay.
so really, yeah, and as you're saying that, I was thinking about it from a point of view is that okay, we're looking at some mobile form of learning. Right now, we're looking at a relationship to maybe creating they have hospital ships. Well, we're going to make an educational ship, and so the concept then is we want to be able to what underlies that belief structure that you're dealing with that, and what are some of the physical manifestations that can emerge from that. One could be, this idea of a boat. It's not as crazy as you think about, because what was it, up in Lehigh University, they made a van that became a space shuttle. And that van looked like a space shuttle, and it drove around the schools where kids actually could go inside of it, because it was designed as the space shuttle, to teach kids about, science and space travel, etc. So if you're looking at a much larger global picture of learning for kids, however you're looking at it, yeah, maybe that's pretty cool to do that. Okay? So what you do then is, in terms of the ideation, is basically this. Once your team has completed your brainstorming, so around that idea, so let's go to your idea in terms of, all right, so if we're going to do it as a skill-based learning environment, you've now brainstormed ideas, and now you begin to look at what ideas are emerging from our discussion, and then you begin to group those ideas together. And the other thing that's important about this is, if you have trouble explaining it, putting into words, one of the best things to do is to try to draw the idea, try to create it, try to see it. And then look for familiarities and cluster things into groups. That's what you're trying to do. Because when you think about some of the strategic planning activities you've gone through in schools, and how linear they become, and really what happens so many times is that voice of judgment, voice of cynicism always pops up as you start playing around with these ideas. People say, that's not going to work, that's stupid, they won't let us do it, or a contract won't. Well, that's what you got to avoid. And what you're trying to do is look at the cool ideas that emerge, cluster them into groups, and then you start working with them. Then you ask the question, what's the best elements then that might live in the system that you want to create? I'm already visualizing that boat. What it possibly could be.
So am I, and I'm off the races now. And the first ship, it's not a boat, sir, it's a ship. The first ship, right? And we should name it after one of the muses, and then you can have a series of ships if the first one works.
Yeah, or, okay, let's make an arc.
Okay.
No, we're not going to make an arc. You know what I've been thinking of? I was thinking of just what you said. Like they have ships, medical ships that travel to the third world countries, and this would be educational. However you've set it up. And I'm thinking sponsored by the United Nations, and all the possibilities that you have for sponsorship of something like this would be awesome.
Yeah. So what you're doing then, and again, you have all these rules. I did give you the slides, so you can download those slides right above the Zoom, under the Zoom. So what you do is in brainstorming, you defer to judgment. Obviously, I've been repeating that over and over again. Encourage wild ideas, because that is important. It allows that to emerge. And also build on ideas of others. Think and rather than but. And that's an important concept, to kind of like get across to people. And particularly if you do any leadership, in your own roles of leadership, and you're trying to get people to think about other possibilities, that to me is an extremely important, simple little concept. Get people to say, yeah, there's that idea, and I would, as opposed to, yeah, but. So a couple little things, to think about as you look at that, and then be visual. Be as less verbal, draw, try to create things, etc. Now the problem is, and what we're trying to learn, you guys are going to help us, because one of the problems with the online version of this is I'm not able to do the stuff that we did when we had people together physically, and you'll see some examples of that, because I would bring in Lego and Play-Doh and Kinects and all that stuff, and just have that stuff out there, and people then would start building. It was really crazy how they would come up. So what we're going to, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, what you're going to have to utilize the best you can is some of the digital tools that allow you to either create cartoons or storyboards or YouTube presentations or whatever to get your points across. So I just want you to be aware of that. But it's very important to be very visual as much as you can. And then you go for quantity, not quality. And what I mean by that is you want to get as many ideas as you can get. And the best way to find one good idea is to come up with a lot of ideas. So these are the rules of brainstorming that your team should try to engage in and explore. But more importantly, what I want you to do as you work as teams is to really reflect upon, how you're reacting to these types of things and what is it doing to you. And then jump back and think about Tom Kelly's The 10 Faces of Innovation and what type of person you are. Are you an architect? Are you a set designer? How do you function in the role of an innovator around these rules? So that's some stuff, these are the types of things that we both want you to kind of gravitate towards in terms of your own self-reflection, which might be good to even journal some of this. Keep your own private journal about the experience.
Now, as in the classes that you met and used Legos and used Play-Doh and used pipe cleaners and things like that, that's not to say that they can't do the same thing
right
independently as a group and then videotape it.
Right. Yeah, totally. And that's what I want you guys to explore to help us learn what makes sense to you with this, doing it, more or less virtually as opposed to being there. Unless you're close together and you can meet, that becomes a different story. But this is something I'm still struggling with, trying to learn. So hopefully you're going to help us understand how we can make this work better. So what you're going to do is, so as you start doing and getting ready for prototyping, then you're going to take a small part of the vision and you're going to try to create a prototype. You're going to try to create something. And what I'm going to do is next week, and I'll post this up for you, I'm going to put up this summer, there's an EDD program that was designed by Dr. Miller, and as you know, she tragically passed away a week ago, unexpectedly. And she was the one who developed a special EDD for special education administrators. But what we did in that class was some interesting things, and I got some good videos that I'll be able to, share with the group so that you can see prototyping in action. So, and if you remember, if you've been reading, if you can,
You want to do the warm up or no?
so if we do the openness, this is stuff that Tim Brown talked about, looking at, when you look at your organization, the question you need to ask yourselves in your present condition, is it open to experimentation? Because as you read in Tim Brown's book, he talks about any type of organization that is highly creative is always encouraging people to experiment with. And that prototyping then really, and as you move into this, is really learning to think with your hands. It allows you to build something. And it is different than specification-led planning driven by abstract thinking. So that's important. And what we're trying to really work on with this is how do we allow that to happen in a virtual world. So prototyping is not creating a working model, but it's giving form to these ideas that you guys have put together, and really it allows you to see the strengths and weaknesses that come out. Because what's going to happen in the 6th week, all of us are going to meet for about 2 hours online, and each team is going to present their prototype to everyone else to get feedback from what the other people are seeing to help you to strengthen or redesign or modify your prototype as you go forward to the final product. Because that's very critical. The ability to get feedback about that so that you're able to understand how feedback is important to reaching the final goal, not the prototyping as the final model itself. So
I like what in the Brown book, IDEO, like one of their mantras is fail early, succeed sooner.
Yep.
And that's like we were talking about before. Can I be working on this challenge and then suddenly get another idea? And like I said, take a right at the next idea. So, and because if you keep following the same steps, you're being linear, and that's like, I might fail later. Fail early, take those left and right turns as you come across them, and succeed sooner.
So yeah, and if you trust that process, then what will happen is, I'm really, both of us are really moving you into divergent thinking. What will happen then when you get feedback from the other teams on what they see and how they respond to it? And also, I would even take this out to some of your colleagues and throw it out there. Then you'll start integrating convergent thinking. That's where that comes in, because remember, if you were only divergent all the time, you'd never get anything done. So convergent thinking is extremely important. And as you look at the Puccio book, that's why his team has you look at those two juxtapositioned against each other, so you can see the interplay between divergent, convergent, and how they are, they're congruent to each other. So that's what is very important about this. So now let's look at, so as I said, this is that national project that we sent to all of you. And I think this, yes, it is. Now let me see if it's going to take me out there.
You probably have seen a commercial about this on television. And I emailed Dr. Gould, and he emailed me. I don't know if it was the same time or what, because both of us thought, oh my God, this is exactly what you're doing. And they're just, the difference might be they're focusing on a high school.
Yeah, let me see. I'm trying to see if I can share the screen, which it looks like I'm not going to be able to do. Have you guys gone out to that? To that thing we sent you about the XQ Super Schools. A couple of you, I believe, have signed up for it.
On TV, you see an African-American young woman with long hair, and she's in a white, almost spacesuit looking get up. And she said, we have to, basically she's saying we have to reinvent ourselves. We have to reinvent ourselves. We have to look at schools and, oh, boo, I know, schools, you're thinking, but we have to reinvent ourselves as the future is coming, because what's going on now ain't going to cut it. And that's basically what this project is about. And if you go out there, you can sign up to be part of this project.
Now
and
you
I
can
think
see
that's
it,
what I
right?
mentioned before. There you go. Rethink high school. We're trying to rethink education in general, and they're putting ads on TV for a challenge to rethink high school, because they know what we're doing is not working.
Yeah, let me show you this real quick, because it might be, and I'm going to tell you, this might be interesting for your team. You know, again, I don't want you to think of this, what you're doing in this, as some goofy activity that, all right, yeah, we're going to do this. But what I want you to look at is, here is this challenge. They're asking people to create teams. And so what the teams then are to explore ways. Now, again, this is only focused mainly on high schools around that. But you can see the process that they're using is the exact same process that we are involved with in this process. So what you end up doing is, when you join this, you can put your team up there, and if you honestly want to, even as part of, even if you're making a broad K-12 or a K lifetime learning environment, you could pull out the section that would work with high school kids and then apply to see if your team could become one of the finalists around this country. So my point why I wanted you to look at this is that there are people out there who are really looking at trying to redesign schools. So what I'm going to recommend to you is your team, get some time, go out, and we sent this out to you, I think last week, to go out and look at this XQ Institute and what it's about. And there are some possibilities that your team might be interested in putting in a project and seeing if there is a possibility that you could win. So that's why I want you, to look at this from the point of view that there is some realities related to what we're having you do here, not just as a project for this class, but this is starting to take on, around the country, because people are tired basically of how our schools are designed right now. And that's what's so interesting about this group. So that's a good example for you, to go out and take a look at. And then, so this is what you see. Hopefully you can see some of those pictures. That's some of the other cohorts who, as you can see, were building models around their challenges and what they were looking at. And I will post some videos, particularly as this group here, where they put together a very unique model of how they could create their schools. So what the prototyping then is an idea here is to make something really rough as a way to help you think the idea through. It's also, the process is about learning, not getting it right the first time. And I can tell you, when you look at what these guys were doing over, a 3.5, 4 hour period of time, they were exploring all types of ideas. And once they got into letting go of their old ways of thinking and kind of went back to learning how to play again, they really started coming up with some really interesting ideas. Again, the challenge for you will be, how do we do this in a virtual world? So the main goal of prototyping then is to make an idea just tangible enough to elicit a response. And I will post some of the videos maybe tomorrow or by the weekend so you can see how they made it tangible enough to get people to respond back to them. Okay? Any comments, questions on what this prototyping is going to be?
I just wanted to point out that on that QX website, the one when you were on one page of it, I don't know if you noticed, there were deadlines. And the first deadline of September, which you've already met already, and that would be creating your groups. The second deadline comes up in November. I don't remember the exact date, but it's on the website. Look at the next date. And in November, then they're looking at your ideas, and you can submit them to see if you qualify to continue on in the QX challenge.
Yeah, so that the point is to get you guys to begin to understand that what we're trying to create for you is an understanding that here's the type of skills that you would need to, and I'll use the word compete in this nationwide project that is designed to, look at least redesigning high school. So here's basically what you can create. You can create a storyboard, and you can do that many different ways, obviously in a virtual environment. Excuse me. You can create a diagram. You can use, mind mapping tools to do this. You can use Prezi to put your prototype together. You can create a story where your team actually ties into the role playing and maybe do some form of a YouTube video to do that. You can create some type of ad that really promotes, what your idea is. You can do a mock-up using digital tools or create a model. Now, again, generally what we did when we had the face-to-face people, we create three-dimensional models. So these are some of the variations that your team can use to demonstrate your prototype of what your learning environment's going to look like, or possibly can look like down the road.
And again, if you create it with things like Legos and Play-Doh and things like that, you can videotape what your presentation is.
You can.
And role-playing is great. I've always had a special place in my heart for role-playing. And thinking back to when my own son was in high school, he and two others got together in my backyard, and when they had assignments due, they did a role play of their assignments, and they might be the battle, some battle of the Civil War, and running around the backyard, role playing the battle, and we've got the music in the background, and I was the videographer, so I'm following them all around. But then they presented this to their class as their answer to the theme that was assigned to them, and that's a great way to express what you want others to see.
Yeah, and the other thing is think about this, just from a learning point of view. Those of you, who are familiar with Montessori or a Steinert school, any of those, that idea of play and that idea of expression in a nonverbal form, which really is what Otto was talking about when he talked about open heart and open mind and open will, that when you're able to integrate all of those together, the possibility of expression becomes even greater. So if you think of musicians, or you think of artists, you think of dancers, and when particularly you think of physicists, many physicists are musicians and have musical talent and skill because they understand why visualization and non-linguistic presentation of information is just important. So if you remember watching Young Zhao's video, he talks about that, that there's not one way of learning. And our problem is the structure under our present system is standardized us so much that the underlying mental model of the system says, yes, there is a standard way of learning, and that's what everyone has to do. So that can, in essence, create a lot of problems for a lot of students, and it also creates problems for teachers and administrators, so as you begin to think about it. So that's basically what we wanted to present to you, to kind of hit you with, all right, you got to now get us your challenge. We'll give you comment back on it if we think, it's strong enough, or might ask you a couple questions. And now, once your challenge is identified, and we've given you, how to create the themes, we're giving you some handouts that were in week, I think, 1 and 2. You should see them, how to frame a challenge, etc. I think was one. And then I posted one today on prototyping. Get your team to look at those and start working with them. And as you go along, as you start doing this, it is extremely important for you to contact both of us in order, with your questions, so we can help guide you through this. That, to me, is extremely important.
And in Brown's book, he says, you've got those, that triad he talks about: desirability, feasibility, and viability of your project. And the point is, a competent designer will resolve each area, but a design thinker will blend them harmoniously.
Yeah, good.
And,
Yeah, great point.
There you have that musical inference again. A design thinker will blend the desirability, the feasibility, and the viability seamlessly.
So basically, if you don't have any questions now, then you can process this. And as your teams meet, you can do some more processing. If anything emerges, let us know. But again, I also, as an individual, I want you to kind of start thinking about how this relates to your source of leadership. How does this creative process start infusing into, when you think about what Heifetz and Linsky was giving you in the 800 about the balcony and the dance floor, as you look at that, as you think about Otto's concepts of open mind, open heart, and open will. All right, okay, how do we begin to think about design thinking? How do I begin to think about it going forward as a leader? So, not to answer that tonight, obviously, but it's what over the next several weeks, as individuals, I really want you to reflect upon that. So with that, that's all we have. If, we're going to stay online here, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. If not, I guess we will say good night. And hopefully, if your teams are meeting, you will know what you're doing.
Well, I have one question. A couple of us would like you both to tell us a little more about the self-analysis in light of innovation personas. And my personal question on that is, so it's a voice thread, or can we do a video, or
Yes.
can we role play?
Yes.
Sock puppets, maybe? Sock
Yes.
puppets?
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, I love sock puppets.
Yes, you could. No, I'm serious. Really, that's the purpose of that.
That's it. He gets an A. He does sock.
No, so I said to you, you can do it as a video, as a voice thread, however you want to do it. The important thing there is that you're able to articulate in some fashion what you think you are. And again, remember, it's subjective. It's like taking a Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs is subjective. But what we want you to do is, at least you got 10 different lenses to begin to think about this concept of innovation. So yes, to everything you said, the answer is yes. So it's up to you how you want to present it. Okay?
select which kind of thinker you are related to, or which kind of innovator. you are.
Yeah, and also what maybe where you have a deficit too. Okay? Does that help everybody?
And also when you're looking at what you are, compare with the folks in your group, just online or on a video chat or something, which strength of innovation each of you are, which
Yep.
what do you bring to the table. And yes, as Dr. Gould said, you're also going to look at where your deficits are as far as innovation. But there's an idea of constructing your group in a certain manner, because we all come together bringing different strengths and different weaknesses, and hopefully somebody will pick up the slack where you've got a weakness.
Okay? All right, so if there is nothing else, I'm going to turn off the record. And if you have no other questions,